I got back earlier than usual, hoping to catch my wife Karen off guard. She's a sales assistant at a local electronics store, and we usually get home around the same time as a policeman. My shifts can be unpredictable, but today I managed to wrap things up early, unlocking the front door. I heard muffled voices coming from the living room. Karen wasn't expecting me, She watches her favorite shows after work. I walked in quietly, thinking about how to surprise her, maybe suggest an impromptu dinner date, but as I stepped into the living room, I saw that she was on the couch, tangled in an embrace with another man. I felt a sharp pain in my chest as I recognized him. Eddie, her coworker. He'd been to our house a few times for social gatherings. I'd never suspected anything between them. Karen's eyes widened in shock when she saw me. She pushed Eddie away and stood up quickly, her face pale. "Bruce, what are you doing home so early?" she stammered. I took a deep breath, trying to maintain my composure. "Everyone stay where you are," I said calmly. I pulled a chair from the dining table and sat down facing them. "Karen, how long has this been going on?" "For a few months," Karen said, clearly taken aback by my reaction. "Bruce, I never meant for this to happen. It just sort of happened." "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It started as just talking, but then it became more. "You thought I didn't notice all this time?" I asked, my voice hinting at surprise. Karen looked at me, her eyes wide with confusion. "Your eyes were wide with confusion. Of course you knew," I said, shaking my head slightly. "You think I wouldn't notice the changes? The late nights? The distant look in your eyes?" Eddie shifted uncomfortably, clearly wanting to leave. I said, "Bruce, I should probably go and stay." I locked eyes with him. "You're a guest in my house, after all." Karen looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Bruce, I'm so sorry, I love you. Can we just try to fix this?" I sighed. "I don't know for now." Turning to Eddie, I added, "You can leave now, thanks for staying." Eddie nodded quickly and practically ran out the door. Karen stood there looking lost. I got up from the chair, feeling the need for some fresh air. "I'm going for a walk," I said, heading towards the door. We'll talk later." As I stepped outside, I heard Karen sobbing quietly behind me. It was already getting dark, so I walked towards the local park, where the cool evening air helped clear my mind. They sell delicious hot dogs there, so I bought one and started walking, eating the hot dog as I pondered what to do next with Karen. I could hear my own voice in my head, asking if I could handle this. I told myself I didn't know, but the truth was I wasn't going to forgive her. I was a man of honor, and I didn't want to crush her hopes outright. But deep down, I knew the betrayal had cut too deep. As I savored the hot dog, I realized it tasted far better than any dinner Karen could have made that night. The simple pleasure of a well-made hot dog. I made myself a hot dog, which was a small but unexpected source of joy. It made me think about how I needed a break and a reset. I had been a hard worker, and by the time I finished the hot dog, I had already earned a couple of weeks of vacation. I made up my mind the very next day I would go to the police station and take that vacation. I didn't know yet what I would do during this time, but I needed it. After finishing my hot dog, I walked around the park to clear my thoughts. The calm surroundings helped me relax. I continued to the city center, wandering aimlessly and letting my mind wander. When I returned home, it was already dark. I was surprised to find Karen asleep. I had expected her to be up waiting for me, eager to talk. However, the house was silent. The house was quiet when I woke up the next morning. I'd been so tired that I'd slept in my clothes from the night before. I made my way to the kitchen and found Karen waiting for me with breakfast. She'd made bacon, eggs, pancakes, and coffee. Normally I'd have been hungry, but I wasn't. My stomach would have growled at the sight, but today it felt like a cruel joke. "Bruce, I made you breakfast," she said softly, hope in her eyes. I just waved it off, feeling a surge of irritation. "This is so benign," I said. "Karen, my stomach was my Achilles heel. I love to eat, but today I couldn't bring myself to enjoy her attempt at reconciliation. Instead, I made myself some instant coffee and ate 4 store. I bought waffles, leaving her breakfast untouched. Karen watched me, clearly wanting to talk, but I couldn't do it. "What can we talk about here?" I said, not meeting her eyes. "I don't see the point." She opened her mouth to respond, but then thought better of it. I left the kitchen and got ready for the day. I had to get my head straight and focus on what I needed to do next. When I got to the station, I went straight to the boss's office. Chief Reynolds and I had always got on well, thanks to my hard work and dedication. He looked up from his paperwork and smiled when he saw me. "Bruce, what brings you here so early?" "I need to take a couple of weeks off, Chief. It's urgent." His smile faded as he studied my face. "Everything okay at home?" "Not really." I admitted that I just need some time to sort things out. "I see you've earned it, Bruce. Take the time you need." "Thanks, Chief. I appreciate it." He signed off on the vacation request without hesitation, and I left his office feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. Leaving the station, I finally knew what I was going to do. My parents lived too far away for a quick trip, and meeting with friends wouldn't help. I wanted to be alone, away from the city. I remembered the story house in the neighboring county that had belonged to my grandfather. Karen and I had inherited it when he passed away, but we hadn't visited much the last time I was there. The house was in poor condition. Grandfather hadn't been able to clean it properly in his later years, so I didn't remember exactly how bad it was. I decided to go there first to see what needed to be done to restore it. I packed a few essentials, got into my car and set off. The drive was peaceful, and the farther I got from the city, the lighter I felt as I approached the county line. The landscape became more rural with open fields and scattered forests. I was about halfway there when I rounded a bend in the road and saw a car pulled over on the shoulder. A woman was standing next to it, waving her arms frantically. I slowed down and pulled over. I rolled down my window and asked, "Are you okay?" "Thank God you stopped," she said, looking relieved. "My car broke down," she explained. "My phone's dead. Can you help me?" I hesitated for a moment, glancing at the car. It looked like it had seen better days. "I have a tow rope. Let me get your car to the nearest service station." After securing her car to mine with the tow rope, we slowly made our way to the nearest town. On the drive to town, she told me she was on her way to visit family but had gotten lost and ended up on this back road. She thanked me profusely for stopping and said she didn't know what she would have done otherwise. I replied that everyone needs a little help now and then. We reached the nearest service station and I helped her get her car situated. When I finally arrived, the place looked even more run down than I remembered. The paint was peeling and the yard was overgrown with weeds, but it had a certain charm and a sense of history. I got out of the car and walked around, assessing the state of the place. The front porch creaked under my weight. The car was dusty, but it had potential. I'd figured out what materials I needed, so I drove to the nearest town and loaded up the car. Then I went back to my city to pick up the lawnmower and some other tools I'd need for the job. When I got home, Karen was gone. I figured she was probably at work. I didn't really care what she was up to, whether she was with Eddie again or not. Anyway, I grabbed the lawnmower and drove back. The lawn was a mess, overgrown with weeds and tall grass. I spent the entire day mowing and cleaning up the yard. I wanted at least the bedroom to be in a livable state for the night. As I worked, I ate the finished product and the store. I bought food to keep me going. By the time the sun started to set, I had made some decent progress. The house was on the outskirts of the city, but the dense thickets surrounding it on 3 sides made it feel like I was deep in the forest. It was quiet, almost eerily so, but it was exactly what I needed. I cleaned out the bedroom, set up a makeshift bed, and sat down. The room wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Okay, let's do the next part. This part can be made larger in size in the evening. His wife will call Bruce and ask where he is. He will only answer that he is resting in a quiet place. I still wanted to say something, but he hung up. She called several more times, but he didn't pick her up that evening. My phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I saw Karen's name flash on the screen. Sighing, I answered, "Hello, Bruce. Where are you?" Her voice was tinged with worry. I replied, "I'm resting in a quiet place. Let's talk about this," she asked, but I hung up before she could say more. She called several more times, but I ignored them. The next morning, I loaded up the car with more materials and headed into town. While I was buying some additional supplies, I spotted Lisa. She saw me too and waved, making her way over. "Hey, Bruce, how are you doing?" she asked with a warm smile. "I'm doing okay," I replied. I was picking up some more stuff for the house when she called. "Picking up some more stuff for the house," I replied. "Great to see you. Listen, I wanted to thank you again for helping me with my car. Can I buy you a coffee? My treat." I hesitated for a moment but then agreed. That sounds nice. We found a small cafe nearby and grabbed a table outside. Lisa ordered us both coffees. She ordered coffees and a couple of pastries. "How are you settling in?" she asked. It's a work in progress, I replied, taking a sip of my coffee. I'm trying to fix up my grandfather's old house. It's in pretty rough shape, but it's a project. She nodded. Sounds like a lot of work. I admire your dedication. What about you? How's it going with your car? It's fixed now, thanks to you. I'm visiting my relatives in the city and staying with them for a bit. It's nice to be around family. We chatted for a while, sharing more about our lives. I found it surprisingly easy to open up to her. I told her about what I was going through. I'd love to see this house of yours, Lisa said. Eventually, I chuckled. There's not much to see yet. It's a bit of a disaster zone right now. But once it's better shaped, I'd be happy to show you around. Sounds like a plan, she said, smiling. I'm looking forward to it. The house still needed. It was a lot of work, but I spent the rest of the day repairing the porch and clearing out more of the clutter inside. As evening fell, I sat on the newly repaired porch, looking out at the overgrown yard. It was quiet, just the sound of crickets and the rustling of leaves. Sitting on the porch that evening, I gazed out at I was just getting started on the porch when my phone rang again. It was Karen. Hello, Bruce. Where are you? Why aren't you coming back? She said, sounding frustrated. I'm just resting in a quiet place, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. You're ignoring everything. Are we getting a divorce or not? You haven't said anything about our future, she pressed. I'm just resting in a quiet place, I replied, looking up at the stars. Why rush in so quickly? I didn't forbid you from meeting anyone, or even Eddie or whoever else. Don't you dare consider me she snapped. I was shaking with anger. Karen, I didn't say that. There's no way I'd just disappear and ignore everything. It's not fair. You can't just leave me like this. I brought a strange man into our house. I don't appreciate it, she shouted. I never meant for things to get this bad. Well, they did, I said, keeping my tone calm. Stop mocking me, she cried, and then I heard the click as she hung up on me. While picking up supplies at the hardware store, I noticed Lisa again. She seemed to be browsing the same aisle, and I couldn't help but smile. Hey Lisa, are you following me? I asked with a playful grin. She laughed and shook her head. No, my cousin works here, so I thought I'd drop by and say hi. Well, it's good to see you, I replied. I said I was happy to do it again. She said she was too. She suggested we grab a coffee, and I said I'd love to. I didn't think she was following me around to offer me coffee, but why not? We walked over to the same cafe and found a table outside. The atmosphere was much better this time. We were both feeling more relaxed and at ease, enjoying each other's company as we talked. I noticed Lisa giving me subtle signs of interest, like a lingering touch on my arm or a playful smile. I found myself responding in kind, leaning in a bit closer and holding eye contact for a bit longer. You're really dedicated to this house project, aren't you? She commented, sipping her coffee, that it's keeping her busy. I agreed and told her that it's something I need right now. Lisa nodded, understanding, and said that it's nice to have a project that keeps the mind occupied. We spent a long time there talking about everything and nothing. It felt good to just relax and connect with someone who wasn't part of the usual chaos. Eventually, I glanced at my watch and saw that we'd been chatting for ages. I said, I've spent so much time here with you, I haven't got anything done at the house. She laughed and said, Sorry for distracting you. No, it's a good distraction. I replied, But seriously, if we're going to keep spending time together, how about you come help me with the house next time? It'd be nice to have some company while I work. Lisa looked at me, amused. You want me to help with the renovations? Why not? It could be fun, and I could use an extra pair of hands. Right, you've got a deal. I came here to visit my relatives and take a break from work, so I'm on a sort of vacation too. Helping out could be interesting. Great, I said, genuinely looking forward to it. We finished our coffee and parted ways, both of us smiling back at the house. I dove into the work with renewed vigor. The place was starting to look better and better. I cleared out more of the debris and started painting the walls in the living room the next day. It was a bright and early start, but as I stepped outside to start my day, I noticed something strange. A car parked at the edge of my property. I hadn't seen it before, and it made me curious. I was curious, so I walked over to the car, looking around carefully. It was an older model, dark blue, and the windows were tinted. As I approached, I noticed the driver's side window was down, and there was a man slumped over the steering wheel. My instincts as a policeman kicked in, and I quickened my pace, my heart pounding. I called out, "Are you okay?" But there was no response. I reached the car and gently shook the man's shoulder. He stirred and looked up at me with blurry eyes. "Help me," he said. "I'm on drugs. Hang on," I said, pulling out my phone to call. As I dialed, I noticed he had a deep gash on his arm and he was bleeding badly. "I've got you. Help." I called for backup and got a clean rag from my car to press against the wound to slow the bleeding. What happened? He winced but managed to speak. "There were marks on the road. Can you tell me anything about the car that hit you?" he mumbled, his voice weakening. I didn't get the plate. The paramedics arrived and took over, loading the man onto a stretcher and into the ambulance. One of the paramedics approached me. "Do you know him?" I shook my head no. I found he said he'd been in a hit and run. "Thanks for your help. We'll take it from here." I decided to head into town to inform the local police about what had happened. It felt strange being on the other side of things, reporting an incident rather than investigating it myself. At the police station, I spoke with Officer Davis, who listened carefully as I explained what had happened. He said he'd look into it and thanked me for letting him know. It made me think back to my time on the force, which made my current situation with Karen seem distant and almost trivial. A while ago, I stopped by a diner to grab a quick bite. I was sitting at the counter sipping my coffee when I got the feeling that there was more to the hit and run than met the eye. The man seemed genuinely afraid, but there was something off about the whole situation. I decided to take a detour on my way back to the house. I was driving along the road where I'd found the car, about a mile from where I'd found the man. I spotted skid marks on the road and broken glass scattered near the ditch. I pulled over and got out to take a closer look. The glass was fresh and glinting in the sunlight, and there were pieces of a taillight among the... As I was looking around, my phone rang. It was Officer Davis, who told me that the car I'd reported stolen a week ago had been found. He said they'd run the plates and that I should stay safe. I thanked him and said I'd keep him posted. I stood there for a moment, taking in the scene before me. A stolen car, a hit and run, and a man left for dead on my property. Something didn't add up. I took a few photos of the scene with my phone before heading back to the house. I reached out to a few old contacts from my days on the force. After a few calls I managed to get in touch with, I called Detective Ramirez, who I knew from my days on the force, to fill him in on what was going on. He said he'd meet me for coffee later that morning at the cafe. Ramirez gave me a firm handshake and said, "Good to see you, Bruce." I told him about the hit and run, and described the man I found. The stolen car and the scene of the accident didn't seem right to me. I told Ramirez, who nodded and looked serious. He said we'd had a few reports of similar incidents recently, where cars were stolen and then used in what seemed like random accidents. He thought they might be connected. What do you think? I went on to say that it could be a number of things: insurance fraud, gang activity, or something else entirely. We're still piecing it together, but I'll look into the details of the car you found and see if it matches any of our cases. Thanks, Ramirez. I appreciate it, I said, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. After our meeting, I went back to the house, my mind racing with possibilities. I spent the rest of the day focused on the renovations, tackling the plumbing issues and starting to paint the living room. It was demanding work, but it provided much-needed distraction. By the time evening rolled around, I had made significant progress. I made a lot of progress today. I took a break on the porch to enjoy the cool night air. My phone buzzed with a message from Ramirez. He said he'd found out that the car I found matches a vehicle involved in a robbery a few days ago. It seems like there's more to this than just a hit and run. I read the message and got a chill running down my spine. I'll be careful, I muttered to myself. Things are getting more complicated. The next day, I decided to take a closer look at the area around where I found the man. I spent the morning combing through the ditch and surrounding woods for any clues. I found a few more pieces of broken glass and what looked like a discarded wallet, but nothing that proved anything one way or the other as I was about to leave. Something caught my eye on a nearby tree, though. It was a strange symbol, something that looked like a cross between a star and a triangle. I took a photo of it, intending to show Ramirez later. This is getting weirder by the minute, I thought, shaking my head. I drove back to the house and kept working on the renovations, but my mind kept going back to the hit and run. Who was the man I'd helped, and why had he been left for dead in a stolen car? The next day, I started by reaching out to some old contacts in the police force, hoping to gather more information. I had to put the situation with Karen in the house on hold for now. I had a mystery to solve, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it that evening. Ramirez called me and said, "Bruce, That symbol you found. It's been showing up at other crime scenes. We're definitely looking at something bigger here. What do you need from me? I asked. I'm ready to dive in deeper. Keep your eyes open and stay safe. I'll be in touch with more info as we get it. After hanging up, I felt a mix of excitement and unease. This was turning into something far more complex than I had anticipated. Over the next few days, I focused intensely on the investigation. Driven by a one evening, Ramirez called me again. Bruce, we've got a break in the case. The symbol you found is linked to a local gang known for staging accidents and robberies. They've been under investigation for a while. Do we have any idea where they're operating from? I asked. We have a lead we're planning a raid on a warehouse on the outskirts of town tomorrow morning. I thought you might want to be there, he said. I'll be there, I replied, feeling a rush of anticipation. The next morning, I joined Ramirez and a team of officers at the designated location. The warehouse looked abandoned from the outside, but we knew better. We moved in carefully, with our weapons drawn, and quickly secured the area inside. We found the stolen vehicles and a cash-in-hand stash of goods from various robberies. It was clear we'd stumbled upon their main operations hub. As we secured the scene, I spotted the man I'd found in the car. He was sitting in a corner, handcuffed. 2 officers were guarding him, so I approached carefully. Remember me? I asked. He looked up and I could see a mix of fear and recognition in his eyes. Yeah, I remember you saved my life. Why were you left for dead? I wanted to understand his role in all of this. I was trying to get out. I wanted to leave the gang, but they don't take kindly to deserters. They set me up to look like an accident, hoping I wouldn't survive. Well, you're lucky you did. Now you're going to help us take them down with his cooperation. We were able to piece together the rest of the gang's operations. The gang was dismantled, and their reign of staged accidents came to an end. With the case closed, the robberies came to an end. I could finally turn my attention back to the house and my own life. After the resolution of the hit-and-run case, I returned my focus to the house. The mystery had been solved, but my life was still in need of repair. I found solace in the physical. I was working on restoring my grandfather's old house bit by bit. Lisa had agreed to help, and her company was a welcome distraction from my troubled thoughts. One afternoon, Lisa arrived with a toolbox and hand-ready to tackle another day of renovations. We worked side by side, painting walls, fixing the porch, and we made plans for future improvements. Lisa usually left early to get back to her relatives, but today she seemed in no rush to leave as the sun began to set. I was busy in the kitchen installing new cabinet handles. Lisa was in the living room painting the last section of the wall. Time flew by, and before I knew it, it was past the time she usually left. I finished my task and headed upstairs to the bedroom, thinking about calling it a day. When I entered the bedroom, Lisa followed me up. I turned to her surprised. Hey, why are you still here? It's pretty late. She smiled a bit shyly. I just felt really good being around you today, listening. Your stories about the investigation made me realize how much I enjoy your company. There was a moment of silence as she waited for my reply. She stepped closer and suggested, almost in a whisper, that maybe we could stay together tonight. I hesitated for a moment, thinking about the implications, but the isolation given the connection we'd built up over the past few days, it was an easy decision. Yeah, let's do that, I agreed. We were alone in the house with no one around to intrude, and the bed, which had seemed uncomfortable when I'd slept there alone, felt surprisingly welcoming with Lisa by my side. Afterwards, we lay in bed wrapped we were in each other's arms, the night enveloping us in a blanket of peace. Lisa broke the silence first. I have a boyfriend, she admitted softly. He cheated on me. I guess I just wanted to feel something different. I felt a pang of surprise and a bit of indignation. So, you did this just for revenge? She shook her head. Bruce, it's not just about revenge. I like you. You make me feel safe and valued, which is something I haven't felt in a long time. My wife cheated on me too. That's why I'm here, trying to piece my life back together. Lisa reached out and touched my face gently. I see. I'm glad we're here now. We talked for a while longer, sharing our stories and finding common ground in our experiences of betrayal and hurt. Despite the circumstances that brought us together, there was a genuine connection between us that felt comforting. Early in the morning, Lisa got up to leave. Dressed quietly, she didn't want to wake me, but I stirred and watched her get ready to leave. I asked, "Will I see you again?" She smiled and leaned down to kiss me. "Of course," she said. I'll be back to help with the house and for you and Lisa's company. The renovation of the house progressed quickly and efficiently with her around. She brought a newfound energy to the project, and together we tackled tasks that would have taken me much longer on my own. The house was starting to transform from a neglected relic into a welcoming home. We painted, fixed plumbing, replaced windows, and even managed to restore the old wooden floors as we worked. Our relationship grew stronger. The days were filled with hard work and laughter, while the nights were spent in each other's arms, sharing stories and dreams. It was a comforting routine, but I knew it was temporary. One evening, as we lay in bed, Lisa turned to me with a serious expression. "In a week," she said, "I'll have to go back to my place," she said quietly. "I've got work and responsibilities waiting for me." I nodded, feeling a pang of sadness. "I know I've got 6 days of vacation left," I said. "I guess we'll have to make the most of them." Over the next few days, we put the finishing touches on the house. We installed new light fixtures, hung curtains, and added some. We added our own personal touches to make the place feel more like home. It was amazing to see it all come together. On one of those days, we decided to take a break from working on the house. We packed a picnic and drove to a nearby lake. It was a beautiful, secluded spot, perfect for relaxing. To relax and enjoy each other's company, we spent the day swimming, sunbathing, and chatting about our future plans as we sat by the water. Lisa looked at me thoughtfully and asked, "What are you going to do after I leave, Bruce?" I sighed, staring out at the shimmering lake, and admitted, "I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do next. I was planning to use this place as my escape, my project to focus on. But now that it's almost done, I need to figure out what's next." Lisa nodded, understanding that it's important to have a plan and something to look forward to. "I know I said I think I'll stay here for a while, get used to the new place. Maybe even invite some old friends over, and I'll definitely have to sort things out with Karen. We need to have that conversation about our future." Lisa reached out and squeezed my hand. "You'll figure it out. You're stronger than you think." We spent the rest of the day enjoying the peacefulness of the lake, savoring the moments together as the sun set. We packed up and headed back to the house, both of us knowing that our time together was running out. We headed back to the house, both of us aware that our time together was running out. Over the next few days, we continued to work on the house, but there was a sense of urgency and a desire to make the most of the remaining time. We cooked meals together, watched old movies, and talked late into the night. It was a bittersweet moment, knowing that this chapter was coming to an end on the last day of my vacation. Lisa and I sat on the porch looking out at the yard. The house was finally complete, and it looked beautiful. "You did an amazing job," Lisa said, smiling at me. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied. I put my head on her shoulder and said, "I'm going to miss this place, and I'll miss you too." I wrapped my arm around her, "But we'll stay in touch. Who knows? Maybe we'll see each other again soon." That night, we made love with a sense of urgency and tenderness, knowing it would be our last time together for a while. Afterwards, Lisa told me, "I really needed this, Bruce. Not just the project, but you too. You helped me heal. You helped me too," I replied, holding her close, early the next morning. Lisa packed her things, and we said our goodbyes. She kissed me softly and whispered, "Take care of yourself, Bruce." "You too, Lisa," I said, watching as she drove away. The final task on my list for the house was to install surveillance cameras and set up a security system. Given everything that had happened recently, I wanted to make sure the place was secure, especially since I'd be away for a while. So I spent the morning mounting the cameras around the property, covering all the entrances and key areas. Once the hardware was in place, I signed a contract with a reputable security service. They assured me that in the event of a threat, they'd respond immediately to protect the house with the security measures in place. I felt a sense of closure. The house was finally complete and secure. It was time to return home and face whatever awaited me there. The drive back was a mix of anticipation and trepidation. I'd been away for weeks and wasn't sure what to expect when I got back. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Karen's car was parked outside. I took a deep breath, getting ready for the conversation we needed to have. As I walked into the house, the first thing I noticed was the silence. It was unusually quiet, almost eerie. I called out, "I'm home." There was no immediate response. I walked through the house, my footsteps echoing off the walls. When I reached the living room, I found Karen sitting on the couch, looking anxious. To her was a man in a suit, holding a briefcase. Karen's eyes were red, and it was clear she had been crying. "Bruce, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. I looked at the man beside her, feeling a knot form in my stomach. What's going on? The man stood up and extended his hand. Mr. Reynolds, I'm Stephen Turner, your wife's lawyer. I shook his hand, feeling confused and apprehensive. What's this about? Karen took a deep breath, clutching a folder in her hands. I was stunned. I was pregnant. How far along are you? She replied quietly. About 2 months. I did the math quickly in my head. This meant she got pregnant around the time everything started falling apart between us. Is it mine? I asked the question, slipping out before I could stop myself. Karen's face fell and she looked down at her hands. I don't know, she admitted. It could be yours, or it could be Eddie's. The room seemed to spin around me. I took a step back, trying to process the information. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked. I was shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. I was scared. I didn't know how to handle it. Then everything with Eddie happened. I didn't know what to do. Stephen Turner cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. Mr. Reynolds, Karen has decided to keep the baby. We need to discuss the next steps, including the possibility of a paternity test and how to move forward. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling overwhelmed. All right, we'll figure this out. We sat down at the dining table and Stephen began. He went over the legal stuff we needed to think about. He explained how to establish paternity and what that meant for custody and support. It was a lot to take in, but I listened carefully, knowing that this was now my reality. After Stephen left, Karen and I were alone in the house. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the situation hanging heavily between us. Finally, Karen spoke. Bruce, I know I've made a lot of mistakes. I understand if you can't forgive me, but I want to do what's best for this baby, as you say. I answered. I wanted to make a joke like the ones I made the last time I spoke to her on the phone, but I refrained. A week later, the paternity test results came back. I was prepared for a range of outcomes, but nothing could have fully readied me for what I was about to discover. Karen and I sat in the doctor's office waiting for the verdict. Eddie had also voluntarily provided a sample, and now the truth was about to come out. The doctor walked in holding a folder. He said, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, I have the results here. You're not the father of the baby, and neither is Eddie. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I turned to look at Karen, who seemed equally shocked. Who is it then? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Karen's face went pale. I don't know, she stammered. There was no one else. I swear, Bruce, I stood up abruptly, trying to control the flood of emotions. Damn you, Karen. We left the office in silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down on us as we drove home. You've grown such an attractive beard, Karen said, trying to break the tension. Her voice was almost admiring. All this time on vacation, you haven't shaved. I glanced at her, my contempt barely contained. It turns out you're even more of a than I thought. I couldn't hold it in any longer. My God, if I tell my colleagues at the station about who I got married, and they'll laugh at me. Karen's face crumpled up, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. She didn't say anything else for the rest of the drive. We both knew there was nothing left to say when we finally arrived home. The silence was deafening. We stood in the living room. Both we were lost in our thoughts, and the house felt cold and devoid of the warmth and hope we had once shared. What do we do now? Karen asked quietly, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. As I got it, you want to keep the baby, right? Karen nodded, wiping her tears away. I want to keep the baby, Bruce, no matter what. I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of responsibility. I understand, but we need to establish some boundaries. I need time to process all of this. We spent the next few days in a tense silence. I tried to avoid them as much as possible, threw myself into work to try to distract myself from everything that was going on at home. One day, Karen came into the room, her eyes red from crying. Bruce, can we talk? I'm sorry for everything. I know I've hurt you deeply, but I want to make things right. I want to be a good mother and I want to fix our relationship. No more, she said softly. I know. I love you, she said. You know, Bruce, despite everything, I still love you. Hearing those words from someone like you is a bit of a humiliation, if I'm honest. We tried to work it out, Karen and I, but we just couldn't agree on the child. We tried mediation, long discussions, and even involved family therapists, but we simply couldn't find common ground to cope. I got myself involved in work. My days were filled with endless tasks and responsibilities. which helped me escape the chaos at home. But the real solace came from my conversations with Lisa. She was my lifeline, a breath of fresh air. In the middle of all the chaos, I found a bit of fresh air in my calls with Lisa. We chatted about everything and nothing. Her job, my cases, the progress on the house, and the little moments that made life bearable. Lisa's voice was a constant reminder that there was still kindness and understanding in the world. One evening, as I was on the phone with Lisa, Karen walked into the room. I glanced at her briefly, then continued my conversation, laughing at something Lisa had said. Karen watched silently, her expression unreadable. She had seen how I'll never forget how much these calls meant to me. They always lightened my mood and brought a rare smile to my face. When I hung up the phone, Karen stood there, her eyes filled with sadness. She asked quietly, "You really care about her, don't you?" "She's been a good friend," I replied, not wanting to add to the already painful situation. Karen nodded, looking away. "I see how you talk to her, how you treat her," she said. "Karen, it's not about replacing you," I replied, trying to find the right words. "Lisa is just someone who understands what I'm going through. She hasn't hurt me." I told her we were just friends, when really I want to leave her because the father is the one who conceived the child, not the one who raised it. I haven't told Karen that yet, but I intend to. What do you think? Can I do that? I'm thinking I can just leave her and go to Lisa. The last time we spoke, she said that she was looking forward to me at home. I don't know what will happen with the divorce and who will have custody of the child, but I definitely don't intend to tolerate this situation.